we heard Jeff Scott on the topic. Who remembers the topic? Who knows the topic? Now, tonight, Sue.
Okay, so have you ever wondered what it would be like to become a disciple? And even if you became a disciple, how in the world would you ever make one? About 15 years ago, I attended a healing meeting featuring Curry Blake, who is the overseer of John G. Lake Ministries. John G. Lake was famous for his healing rooms in the 1930s. He was so successful, they actually had to close a hospital in Spokane, Washington for lack of patients. So the night of the meeting, which was in Boulder, it was standing room only. We were packed like sardines. Now, Curry asked the members of the church to raise their hand, so I raised my hand. Then he asked all the visitors, which were about 50%, to raise their hands. Then he said, okay, I want the members to pair with the visitors. So I paired to the gal next to me. Then he asked, okay, ask them what they need for their healing. So I asked her, and she said, well, I've got a bad knee, and I'm allergic to water. I'm like, allergic to water? I'm like, what? She goes, yes, and it's quite problematic. I imagine so. You know, so I'm like, okay, no problem. Curry can do it. He can heal you. So then Curry says, he goes, okay, now I want all the members to pray for the visitors. You're going to pray for their healing. I'm like, what? I came there to get healing myself. I had never prayed for anybody in public to this point yet. So Matthew 7:7 kicks in hard. I'm asking. I'm like, oh, Lord, how do I do this? Oh, Jesus, help. And then my knees were knocking because I was so nervous. But I believed, because I had seen miracles before, and I'd had miracles happen to myself. So belief wasn't the problem for me. So he starts us all together in a corporate prayer. We're with our partners. And then he goes, okay, I want you to keep on praying for your partner. Well, I didn't know what to say, so I just started praying in tongues. Well, after we were done, he goes, okay, I want all the visitors to do something they couldn't do before. So she starts doing little squats. She goes, oh my gosh, my knee, it's better. And I'm like, yes, at least I got one out of the two. And then she takes off out. She goes, I'll be right back. She takes off out of the sanctuary. So I'm standing there, and all of a sudden I see her working her way, pushing her way through the crowd back up here. She goes, my scars, all of my scars are gone. I'm like, what scars? She goes, when I was homeless, I was stabbed in the back a bunch of times, and all the scars are gone, and I can drink water now. I'm like, oh, so we were jumping up and down, yeah. So what happened? What happened that night? Well, Jesus gives us an example in John 15:5. He says, yes, I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit. He didn't say a little fruit. He didn't say average fruit. He said much fruit. That's what happened to us that night. We got more than we asked for. For apart from me, you could do nothing. And then if you go down a few more verses in verse 8, he says, when you produce much fruit, there's that much fruit again, you are my true disciples. Whoa! So if we produce this kind of fruit, we're his disciples. This brings great glory to my Father. Well, I was being discipled by Jesus that night. Before we make a disciple, it's important we become a disciple ourselves. Amen? It's hard to make a disciple if we are not disciples ourselves. So how does one make a disciple? Let's look at what a disciple is. A disciple is a learner, a pupil. It's an action word. You are doing something and putting into practice what you're learning. The Lord is our teacher. He can use other people, but He is our teacher. Now, I'm going to give you an example of how to make a disciple. However, it's important that you hear from God to be a disciple or make a disciple, since Jesus is our teacher. Do you agree? How do you hear from God? This is my number one question I get from people. I always tell people to read the Word daily. If you'll read the Word, you will hear from God. I guarantee it. Now, Jesus tells us in John 8:31, if you abide in my word, you are my disciples indeed. So it tells us again how we are his disciples. The word abide means to remain, to continue, to live in that word. Why was John G. Lake so successful in his healing rooms? Because they were in the word daily for 30 days in a row. My sister, who gave me permission to tell this story, by the way, uses her testimony to witness to people all the time. She tells her story so others will be encouraged, because if she can do it after everything she's been through, then anyone can. She's been married 6 times. Some of her marriages were very abusive. She actually had one marriage counselor take her aside and tell her, I've never told this to any of my clients before, but run as fast as you can away from this man. He is no good. Yeah, wow. 2 of her husbands both died of heart attacks in their 40s. Yes, and she deeply loved them, and they deeply loved her too. In the middle of all this, her 14-year-old daughter was murdered by her boyfriend. Then he tried to burn the house down to cover up the crime. Shortly after this, if that wasn't bad enough, she gets diagnosed with the progressive form of MS. Now, the MS has ravaged her body over the years, and she's younger than I am. And she has been in a wheelchair for the last 4 years. When her last husband, who also died of a heart attack 2 years ago, when he finally died, he was her main caregiver. And she just wanted to give up. She was so depressed. She went down to 72 pounds. She couldn't take care of herself anymore. So we convinced her to go into a full-time care assisted living. Now, my sister has told me for years she never hears from God. She never read the Bible very much or attended church very often, but she always wanted to hear from God like I did. So while she was in assisted living, I asked her, I said, Lynn, let's read Proverbs together. Let's do one verse for the next 31 days. She goes, okay. So I said, okay, after we read that verse every day, we'll text each other and tell each other what we got of that verse that day. So she would text me, after a few days, she would text me just amazing revelations she was getting, and I knew she was hearing from God. After we were done with those 31 days, she wanted more. So I turned her on to the Daily 8 reading plan that we have out here in the foyer. The Daily 8 is where you read 8 verses a day for 6 months, and you'll have read the whole entire Bible in 6 months. She loved it. And it wasn't no time when she was starting to hear from God. She was getting so much better that she was able to go home and start to live on her own again. Well, then she wanted more. And so I said, okay. So I turned her on to the YouVersion. It's an app you get for your phone, the YouVersion Bible. And it's got like 50 translations of the Bible, and it has all kinds of reading plans. Well, she started doing that. And then she still wasn't, this is early on, she still wasn't quite sure she was hearing from God, even though I knew she was. So one day, she's still used to everybody doing stuff for her, and she needed to get a Generac because she lives in the country, and she cannot be without power, and they get lots of snowstorms and severe weather. So she was kind of relying on my brother and my dad to kind of arrange all this for her, and she was praying to God, God, what should I do? They're dragging their feet. I need to get this taken care of. And she said it was like somebody yelled and bold said, Just make the darn call. So she's like, oh. So she called the Generac company herself and got it all arranged. Everything went smooth. They came out, lickety-split. And she was like, wow. So even then, she was like, okay. So she went to this little tiny Methodist church down the road from her, and she asked the minister, the pastor there, she goes, now, does God ever talk really loud and boldly to you? And the pastor said, why, yes, especially when he's trying to get your attention. So that convinced her. She was convinced, okay, I'm hearing from God. So now she hears from God daily. She took that YouVersion Bible plan. She's read in the last year, okay, this is just in 1 year, she's read 214 plans. I didn't even know there was that many in the YouVersion Bible. She reads 7 plans a day. She's always got 7 plans going. 3 of them are year-long devotionals where you read the Bible in 1 year. The other 4 are anywhere from a few days to a few weeks to a few months. But it doesn't matter. Whenever she finishes one, she just adds another. So she always has 7 going on. She gets up at 4 a.m. and starts reading. When she finishes her plans, then she watches Joyce Meyer, then Andrew Womack, followed by Joel Osteen, and she ends it with Joseph Prince. Then she spends time with God, praying and listening to him before her healthcare worker comes at 9 a.m. Now, in this last few years, well, she's only been doing this for a year and a half, she's gained 30 pounds, so she weighs 102 pounds now. She's gotten amazing reports from the doctor. The MS has stopped progressing. Yes, amen. And people don't even recognize her anymore. They're just like, oh my gosh, what happened to you? Just her mental attitude, everything has completely changed. All because she reads the word daily and hears from God. That's all she does, and all these things have taken place. So, if you want to hear from God, stay in his word as if your life depends on it. If you want to make disciples and be one yourself, get plugged into the vine, who is Jesus, and stay there. Then show others how to get plugged in and read the Bible consistently. If you do that, your efforts will multiply and you will make an unlimited number of disciples. That's how you make disciples. Amen?